Henry Cavill recently appeared on a podcast with Matthew Vaughn, who directed Argylle, which thankfully did not have any sex scenes in it. And he said that he doesn't understand them and he doesn't personally enjoy having to do them either. He said, "I'm not a fan. There are circumstances where a sex scene is actually beneficial to a movie rather than just the audience, but I think sometimes they're overused these days. It's when you have a sense where you're going, is this really necessary or is it just people with less clothing on? And that's when you start to get more uncomfortable, thinking there's not a performance here. There's not a piece which is going to carry through the rest of the movie." He added, sex scenes can be great in a movie and can really help with the storytelling. Most of the time, the human imagination is going to trump it, like the instrument.
Yeah.
So it can be a little bit of a cop-out if a TV show or movie is just filled with gyrating bodies and you're going, okay, but what is this doing for us apart from the idea of, oh, a naked person? Great.
What's funny is I don't actually just attribute that to sex scenes. I actually, for the most part, when the storytelling is done right, I attribute that to how they handle violent scenes as well. One of the best examples I can think of is the first time I saw The Dark Knight. I remember it being far more violent than it actually was. The best example being when he like gets into the mob headquarters by posing as a dead body, and then he basically puts the knife in the dude's mouth.
Wait, who is the Joker?
The Joker, when he puts the knife in the dude's mouth, and he gives the whole speech about how did you want to know how I got these scars and stuff like that. And in my brain, I thought of it as like I actually saw him cut this dude's face, but it's not. What happens is you hear the music. The tension from the music build. He goes, and then you hear a crescendo, and it cuts away to him basically dropping the body on the floor. But in my brain, I processed that as something far more violent than it actually was. It wasn't until I rewatched the movie that I realized that they hadn't shown it. Which is just great filmmaking, which means that for the most part, what you're seeing is a lack of skill on the point of, on behalf of the creators who don't know how to suitably, incredibly build the tension in their scenes to make a implied sex scene that cuts before it happens worth it.
I mean, when he says they can be great and they can advance the plot of a movie at times, I'm like, citation needed. Add an example. Go ahead. Name one example if you can. Because if Oppenheimer is an example that he would name, I disagree.
It didn't need it in Oppenheimer.
No.
It didn't. Not in my opinion.
Has there ever been a movie where it was absolutely necessary?
I can't think of one. I've got some examples of TV shows that could have probably gotten away with it, but didn't need it and didn't do it. But for the most part, when I see it, it doesn't really add to it. I would say that some of the... Okay, so in True Detective, in season 1, there's a good amount of nudity. And in my brain, it built out the seriousness and the reality of the world they were living in, which is that you're looking at something that's not made for kids. It's a story that's not made for kids. There's a harsh world to the violence and the depravity of what you're seeing there. And the nudity fills in that harshness and makes you take the story more seriously because it's saying, look, this is not for kids. This is not sugar-coated for kids. And I actually appreciated that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I recently watched that show and I actually would agree with you.
Yeah. Like if you're watching that show, which is as dark as it is, and then they're doing the clothed strip club thing, you're gonna be like, this suddenly feels very edited for television, and it takes away the seriousness.
Takes you out of it for sure.
Really? Because I mean, I think streaming ruined decency in our media because they're not subject to the same regulations. But Breaking Bad was aired on network television and it didn't feel like it was being sugar-coated or made kid-friendly at all. It had veiled sex scenes or veiled nudity, but it was very minimal.
The story was different, though.
Yes, it's a darker story.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's darkness to Breaking Bad, but there's still a certain amount. I don't even know how to describe it.
Because the subject matter was different. Breaking Bad was about him cooking meth and doing it for his family, whereas True Detective is about these guys who are investigating a sex crime.
Yes.
And how that intertwines with their own lives.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't watch True Detective, so I wouldn't know.
So like watching that, I feel like it would have shortchanged it if they hadn't done that.
But most of the time, if I'm watching a streaming show that has excessive sex scenes or nudity, they start off a scene with just sex.
Yeah.
And then it goes into a dialogue out of nowhere.
Yeah.
It's like, you could have just shown us the dialogue because this had nothing to do with
True
it.
Detective is the exception. Most of the time, the only thing a sex scene serves in a movie or a show for me is to just feel uncomfortable with whoever I'm watching this show with.
Or just alone, honestly.
Yeah,
like
or just feeling like a creep.
Yeah.
Like a voyeur.
It's voyeuristic.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you're messed up for like, no, don't point the finger at me. Like, you forced me to watch this.
And Henry Cavill is saying that he's not a fan of doing them. And
Matthew Vaughn also said that he doesn't include sex scenes in his movies because he doesn't even understand how to direct them.
It wouldn't make any sense for Matthew Vaughn movies are so quirky that whatever sex scene would be in there would be quirky and weird anyways.
I guess so.
Which it's already weird that to think about two people simulating having sex with each other in the first place.
Yeah.
Right. Like, how are we going to
so
suspend
awkward.
disbelief on it?
It's interesting to hear like different Hollywood actors' school of thought on this because look, we there was just the story recently. Who was the actor that we were just talking about recently? We didn't end up covering it on here. Who said he almost? Oh, it was Christopher Eccleston from Doctor Who said that he basically got like Me Too'd before Me Too was a thing by this girl who said that he put his hands where they shouldn't be on
During
set
a sex
during a
scene,
sex scene, and he's like, and people on set backed him up and said no, he didn't.
Well,
right?
it's presumably all on camera, so they would be able to see what happened anyway. But he didn't even name who it was or what project it was.
But hearing different actors have different schools of thought when it comes to sex scenes, like the older actors have a very different take on it because they come from a time when there was a hell of a lot less expectation to be regulated on set by directors, by the studios, which are always looking to minimize risk and prevent these types of Me Too stories from coming out in the public.
Well, it's not just Me Too. I mean, okay, intimacy coordinators were introduced into these sets because people feel uncomfortable about filming sex scenes.
Yeah.
Understandably, people feel uncomfortable about simulating sexual acts on camera with an entire room of people looking at them doing it. That's something that I understand being uncomfortable about, and I don't think it should be an expectation for their job.
Now they're
so they
saying-
thought, we don't really care whether they feel comfortable about doing sex scenes, but we definitely care about our liability if they make an accusation about it in this post-Me Too world. So we're going to introduce intimacy coordinators with the justification that supposedly they're there to make everyone feel comfortable, but really they're just a glorified HR rep who is there to avoid the studio being in a liable position for something going wrong.
It's also interesting because whenever the new generation of actors talks about why they like having the intimacy coordinators on set, they never explain the job in a way that doesn't seem like it's something the director could do themselves. Like if the director was good enough at their job that they would be able to do the same thing.
Intimacy coordinators are usually multi-hyphenates who direct as well, though.
I mean, most of the ones, no, it's like a course you have to take now. Like most of them, from what I've seen, they're just basically HR people. It doesn't look like they actually have any history of actually directing a ton of work.
What do they actually do? Are they brought in specifically to direct? Like,
yes, to like this hand can go
that
here.
scene?
Older actors have a problem with it because they feel like it destroys the honesty of the scene because they have to feel. Remember what do they always talk about? Like when we talked about with Arden and all that stuff. You have to be free. You have to feel uninhibited. And then you have this person saying you can't put your hand here, can't put your hand here, can't look here for. You know what I'm saying?
There's nothing uninhibited.
It runs contrary to their actual philosophy on acting.
There's nothing uninhibited to begin with about simulating sexual acts on camera with an entire room of people looking at you.
Well, what they're saying now is a lot of them are doing closed sets for these types of things, which means like cameraman, director, intimacy coordinator, minimal people. So it's not the room full of...
because people feel uncomfortable.
Yep.
Because it's not something you're supposed to do. Like, sex is supposed to be private.
And back in the day, it was pretty normal to not want to do these types of things. But now you're kind of shunned as an actor if you choose not to do these things.
420 Funny said to $20 saying, the only sex scene that makes sense is the one that makes John Connor. Other than that, I've been rolling my eyes for years at the forced romance that's totally needed, especially the ones after a long time with no showers.
I'm going to go watch Terminator and Terminator 2 this weekend then.
Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.